In previous real-side experiences I've shared over the years are the ones that involve a particular body type, the vampire. These are beings that through the consciousness they have constructed for themselves, so is this expression of a body type effected, one with a practically eternal lifespan, at least until the simulator they reside in implodes, a longevity that is generally dependent upon the consumption of blood, though there are a number of variations with the species. Some require consumption of food, others do not, as an example. What seems to be a constant is their general necessity for blood and the means by which their numbers increase, through a process of converting others to their kind. The vampires overall are aligned and associated with the dark forces, working in various capacities on their behalf, and if not, they will still tend to be operating in abrasive and destructive ways. Such is the design of their consciousness, intent, and inclination. After all, everything effected from a consciousness must reflect its nature, and an abrasively constructed consciousness of a twisted, ill intent overwhelmingly will give rise to equally as distorted body forms, the various demonic, reptilian, werewolf, entity, and indeed vampire body types. Creational positioning will also reflect a consciousness construction that not only will the body type be of a more monstrous design, but such beings will find themselves resigned to the more dismal areas of creation, the lower astral predominantly, a nightmarish, hellish-like region indeed, although the vampires do operate on the physical also, and in actuality have a presence on the earth. My initial encounters with vampires on the real side would have them presenting themselves in a manner typical of the species, of their general intent and drives, and not only would they automatically attack me should our experiences converge, but on several occasions attempt to convert me, to make me a vampire also. But as must be so in a simulator based on cause and effect principles, where each participant is responsible for the causal idea installations into the consciousness, which then generate the chosen effects, what can or cannot feature in our experience is dependent on our having agreed with and incorporated these ideas into the consciousness. Throughout our many lifetimes, we have installed quite the database of ideas, much of which will be subconscious. We will be unconscious of them due to our inability to access that which has been transferred to the subconscious backup idea filing system, as we assume a new body form and memory body each lifetime around. But regardless, the ideas of the consciousness, including the larger part of it, the subconscious, will be effecting its design. Many ideas have we consciously or inadvertently taken on that can translate as the potentiality of unsavory situations in relation to others. In modern times, the simple example of what we watch on TV serves as a means of idea installation. For unless we consciously disregard what we experience which will be effected from an idea, it will be a consciousness installed. And even then, where attention and focus is placed on ideas, results in them being added also to the consciousness. Realistically then, it is virtually impossible to not have our consciousness programmed by others, based on the simulation we share with them and the creations they manifest within it that may draw our attention, focus, that we may apply an emotional response to, categorize them as that which we like or dislike, and yet, despite how we differentiate the ideas, that we have applied a consideration, an emotion to them, will have them a consciousness installed also, until the point where we recognize how a creation works and begin a process of a consciousness facing and releasing of all ideas that it contains, the process of awareness. We are potentially the experiencer of everything, every idea it comprises of. In regards to vampires and their inclinations, they are subject to the same cause and effect simulator restrictions as any other being. They may be able to enter our experience, as we all do share the same overall simulator arena. Therefore, we must all share the same ideas which affect it, and they may be motivated to attack us and attempt to convert us to their own species, but their success in this regard depends on our agreement in relation to them and their intent. A little like a decided script between movie actors, a karmic contract of all the particulars, all that can potentially occur between the individuals involved. And the sheer volume of vampire and monster-orientated movies that captivate the attention and where emotional attachment is applied, little wonder such body forms can enter the experiences, physical and real side, and carry out their inclinations and intents. But as I said, as we become more aware, as we set an intent to release the consciousness, whatever ideas it consists of will no longer have a bearing. We are no longer the recipient of their nature, and can progressively walk through a multi-dimensional creation unmolested by such ill-intended beings. As such, as the years rolled by, initially would it be prudent for me to retreat from the vampires I encountered, but as the agreements began to be released, so their ability to harm me became less, to the extent that they and many other body forms that previously were able could do nothing to me unless I consciously permitted it. As the great creational wake-up has proceeded, so many beings have been stepping up, including the various ill-intended and driven, dark force affiliated in all their expressions, body forms. And although many vampires still cling to their desire for destruction, many also have been choosing to recognize the ears and assist in whatever ways make sense. This would lead to a number of interesting experiences over the years where certain vampires would present an option for the new friends, that of a conversion into vampires. Their intentions were sincere. To their considerations, such a body form is far more resilient than, say, a human's. It doesn't suffer the aging process, for example, and would afford greater survivability than the more delicate human forms. Although, as impressions confirmed at the time, to allow oneself to be vampire converted, you now are linked to the one that made you. It becomes as though a shared consciousness in a sense. But the maker has more control over it and is in a position of influence therefore. And although the vampires offering this at the time were sincere, intent can change moment by moment, and should the vampires revert to type, then they may very well abuse the control they potentially have over those they had converted. A year or so would roll by, the occasional real side experience with the vampires, until recently, where I was shown how a demonic, godlike being, who was in fact the creator of the original vampire and werewolf and all that followed, and therefore had great influence over them, had in fact stepped up with the guides, that his influence over these body forms could potentially culminate in all of them choosing to step up and become more aware, or in the very least he would moderate their behaviour, that they no longer would act abrasively toward others. And it seems this is having the beneficial impact predicted, in that the vampires, now being reined in by this demonic creator, are once again deciding differently. Not all of them, as it is an individual decision to become more aware, but indeed would I have several real side experiences where I would be approached by and have audiences with various vampires, and including highly positioned vampires that represent the overall interests of the species, and they would be expressing their intent to step up. Interestingly, this also would have the vampires once again suggest the option they had many years ago, that of being converted into their kind. As on one real side experience a few days ago, would I be in the presence of a very powerful vampire elder who had great sway and influence over all the vampires and their myriad expressions. He would be dressed in resplendent robes, looking human in appearance, and came across as a positively charming individual. My impressions revealed his sincerity, as it had with all the vampires I had encountered these recent weeks, and he would present the same option, that of conversion into a vampire body form. Interestingly, there were many options and variations available. As I said, if one becomes as a vampire, their consciousness rather becomes fused with the one who made them. Therefore, their consciousness becomes as though in addition to one's own, as though taking on a whole new set of files into our computer, which generates all the additional potential effects that it will, according to the vampire that converted you and his or her designed consciousness. As such, this could potentially bestow the newly converted vampire with all manner of capability that could be beneficial, creationally speaking. Although it must be stressed that all of this would be just the ideas, the simulation, altered, enhanced body forms, and has nothing to do with the real awareness or the ease, other than the comparison it and all ideas provide for the recognition of the true reality, and one would endeavour not to get lost in the phenomena of creation. Nevertheless, if a body form enhancing in any way improves creational survivability on the physical, then it is worth consideration. After all, our awareness, our intent is retained. We simply are switching vehicles, like assuming possession of a new car, but one that is perhaps better designed to handle the more arduous terrains. The options this vampire elder suggested would imbue the recipient with varying abilities, but additionally would certain of these abilities allow as though a greater dimensional access. Of course, we all are already multi-dimensional, and through a real awareness have we full creational access already. We just need that the personal self allows it and releases the self-imposed limitations that deny this. But this was more from a physical level perspective, as though the ability to relocate to alternate dimensions, worlds and creational positions through the additional abilities as granted via the ideas taken on through the consciousness fusing that becoming a vampire results in. And with the vampire body form's greater resiliency to external factors, stressors, and variables, so these physical level translocations would not be such a hazardous affair. For indeed, the vampire elder would show me all the potential worlds, creational positions one could access, according to the consciousness infusing that occurred, according to the vampire that did the converting, as evidently the more powerful the vampire, the greater the abilities they had in this regard, that would be bestowed upon the one they converted. He suggested this as a greater means of spreading the references of the ears, that all these various creational positions could be accessed from the physical, as opposed to the real side, and then requiring what had transpired there to filter through to the physical personal selves, if indeed it even managed to do so. That indeed many vampires were stepping up, but only certain powerful ones had such a capability that could be passed on through the conversion of others to their kind. Hence why such elders were very particular about who they converted, and who then took on their abilities. And so not all vampires can seemingly translocate all over creation in this fashion. As I said, he was sincere in his intentions, at least at that moment, and my encounter with him would terminate with my agreeing to at least deliver and take his offer, open to all those agreeable, into consideration. For even were I to consider this a nonsensical course of action, to turn down his offer would be deemed disrespectful. So I was somewhat catering to his ego, so to speak, as the vampire numbers are vast, and they are reaching out again seemingly. Every awareness is precious, regardless of the body form, and so I am going along with this to see where it may lead. In an altogether different scene would I be witnessing a conversation between two dubious dark force characters. They were in a house or other, and were discussing the necessity of locating a hidden and very ancient alien base that was located in Alaska, for the purposes of securing powerful alien artifacts and technologies the base was purported to contain. Little further could I discern from this. It was as though I had entered the scene at a point where much information discussed I had then missed, and little by way of impressions would fill in the blanks. However, these two characters were in association with the two other Dark Force individuals, a man and a woman, and it was that I was more so to be shown what the man and woman were doing, but as though had entered the movie early in fact, and caught the preceding scene that had little bearing on the main feature, other than the association all four individuals shared. For as I now observed the activities of the man and woman, they would be stationed on the earth, and indeed be seeking to kidnap a young girl. The man was more in the role of the sinister sidekick. The woman was a very powerful black magic practitioner, and had all manner of creational manipulating capability. Their target would be a young girl, as I said, around the age of 10, I would suggest. Overall, she appeared human, but impressions suggested she was a hybrid of some kind, a combination of various alien and human genetics, and this would endow her with the only feature that would distinguish her as being different from a regular human, that her eyes would be of an orange-yellow coloration, and would tend to glow, and if emotion ran high, would flash. This young girl would be an individual who had enormous consciousness-developed capability herself, though she didn't realize this. Additionally, would she be preparing to step up with the guides, and based on Earth as she was, she would be very instrumental in what is to come, Earth-based and indeed multi-dimensionally, in regards to the great wake-up through the tremendous abilities and potential she had. As such, she was in a vulnerable position, for in the preliminary stages of agreement releasing, as she would have been, there will be retained then much by way of agreements the dark forces can take advantage of, and as such can they launch various attacking efforts, or, as in this case, a kidnapping, in an attempt to discourage, derail the individual from their choice to step up, or even eliminate them. And indeed, would the two Dark Force individuals blatantly seize the young hybrid from the very streets, they would pull up alongside her in a car, drag her inside, and drive off. The woman, very powerful magically as I said, would delight in effecting all manner of phenomena as she drove the vehicle to the location where they would imprison the girl. She would cause trees to spontaneously ignite, structures to explode, basically a form of telekinesis, impacting the very simulation she drove through at will, causing general mayhem and panic amidst all the people she passed by. She would bring her car to a halt in a very hazardous fashion, causing it to spin in a dizzying circle, to have it even lifted from the ground, suspended as though defying gravity momentarily, before bringing it to a stop right by the building they intended to secure the girl within, but bringing the car to a halt in such a fashion that it seemed as though she would hit a terrified elderly man, but in fact the car stopped mere centimetres from him. She evidently found this more amusing than running him over. She and her sinister male associate would escort the confused young hybrid inside, her eyes flashing in response to her situation. Despite the woman's abilities, these in fact would be no match for the young hybrids if she came into the realization of her full potential. The woman and man knew this, and so their ability to retain her, or whatever they intended for her, was dependent on the young girl not discovering her consciousness designed and developed skills. The scene would switch. I had been in an observing capacity, but now I was inserted into the experience as a simulated form, where interaction with all other present participants could be possible. In fact, the scene would be my place of work, a supermarket. And while going about my duties, there would be suddenly a great commotion, and as I looked, so would a variety of animals be bursting into the supermarket. Everything would descend into a bedlam, but in actuality it was the other human participants, workers and staff, that were in a panic-driven frenzy. The animals were simply entering the store and causing no damage or harm to any of the individuals. It was determined as to the reason for the animals' presence, as they would approach me, and there I would find myself surrounded by jaguars, black panthers, wolves, etc. Initially, they were making the kind of sounds associated with their species, but then their roars and growls would become as English language that I could understand, a kind of being-to-being communication that my real awareness translated into a form my personal self could understand. It seemed these animals, directly animated through real awareness, representing then the ears, were communicating the necessity of rescuing the young girl hybrid that I had witnessed being abducted from the previous scene. For indeed, she was recognized by life as a key asset, one that could be of great benefit, life and awareness speaking, through her sincerity of real intent, coupled with her tremendous capability as developed with her consciousness, although a capability as yet unrealized and tapped into. As I said, she was vulnerable to the dark forces and their abilities to impact her experience adversely through a consciousness that also harbored such agreements that facilitated such. But just as we may have a consciousness design that allows us to be kidnapped, we can place the idea that the potentiality of rescuers can be so, as each individual sets up their ongoing movies, where they assign the roles that others can then assume if they so decide, roles we have made available consciously, or those present subconsciously that we are unconscious of. And so it was that the young hybrid, imprisoned as she was, and whatever the dark force agents intended for her, was a situation by her own design, but she had extended the desire for assistance. She had installed that as an idea in her consciousness, and others now could step into the available position as her liberator, but always would have to work within the parameters she has set. When we involve ourselves in the simulated affairs of others, We are playing their game and by their rules, and we can only realistically assist them to the extent that they allow. And so these animal forms had informed me that this rescue option was available, as though the ears providing me with this opportunity through these animals. A great value then had been placed on the hybrid, and it was desired that she be extricated from her dark force captors. I would agree to assist, and accompanied by all the animals, would vacate the supermarket, intending to rescue the hybrid from the clutches of the dark force witch and her male minion, that she then could proceed with her awareness process, unlock her potential and consciousness developed capability, and play her part in what is to come. The experience would end there, as I said, if I was successful with my rescue effort was really dependent on the hybrid and her agreements, and maybe I will be shown more of what transpired or what is to come in regards to this gifted hybrid, and indeed if I am shown further developments with the vampires. And so, sing the NUUU song. It is your connection to the true reality, the all is, that the real you, your real awareness, is a part of. NUUU.